What is the difference between epic, user story, and tags? It is very important in this case you focus on the difference. And this is not the time for you to start giving scenario on how have you used user story or how have you used epic. You have to be very, very specific in the difference between the epic, story, and tags. How I'm going to answer this in an interview is basically to start with the epic. Why is that? Because the epic is a larger story. And epic is basically a list of high level functionality of what a user wants. In an epic, basically we have who are we building this epic for, what is it, and also what is the benefit of this towards, and what is the benefit for the end user, and also having a list of acceptance criteria. And in order for the team to basically work on this epic, they have to further break this down epic into a user story so that it's going to be small, so that it's in a workable, so that it's small enough to be worked in a sprint. And as a team, we're looking at the epic and have high level discussion and further determine how we can break those epic down into a user story. And as we are breaking this user story down, we are also focused to ensure that we also have the who are we building this story for, what is it we are building, and what is the benefits, what is the goal of having this, and also having an acceptance criteria. So far in my experience, an epic can take typically close to 3 months for us to meet the definition of done. And a user story can be completed within a sprint. And another big clue that I've known that's very different between an epic and a user story is that an epic might have a lot of acceptance criteria and high level description of a functionality. And now with the user story, our team are now able to make it smaller so that we can be able to complete it within a sprint. And the tags are now series of things we must do to meet our story done. And the tags is now series of steps or series of activities we do as a team to help meet our user story into meeting our definition of done. And sometimes we also use tags to track things. We also use tags to do our day-to-day activities. We also have our tags to basically visibility and reminder in our board. So in a summary, the big difference between epic, user story, and tags is an epic is a larger story that can take multiple weeks to complete, and a user story is a smaller story that can complete it within a sprint. And a task is a series of things we must do to either meet our story or series of things we must do to meet our overall definition of done in a particular given functionality. That's how I'm going to answer that in the interview. So now, let's get into the next question. So the next question is, what is the challenges agile team face while creating a user story? So this is very important that you focus on the challenge, right? You are not here to start talking about what is a user story, what this user story will do, but heavy focus on the challenge because that's the key points, right? So as you're given interview question, it is very, very important you're listening for keyword, right? I teach this to my students a lot. I always tell you, like, when you are asked a question, looking for keyword, start writing notes, and it's okay to take little tiny notes, and you can tell the interviewer that you are taking notes so that it can help you focus on answering the right thing. Key mistakes people do in interview is basically when you are asked one thing, you are answering something that have no relation to the question, and that will automatically disqualify you from that interview. So how I will answer this in an interview is basically to talk about challenges I have experienced, my Scrum team have faced while creating user story. In this case, you can even give example. This is the time now you can give example, talk about your current experience and talk about your past experience. So in this case, how I'm going to answer this interview is to give my example of how challenges I've faced as a Scrum Master where team were having challenges in creating this story. So when it comes to user story, given my experience so far, the challenges I've seen with the team is they basically are insisting on one person being the sole creator of a user story. And whereby they expect, for example, a product owner should go in and be the only one to write a user story where sometimes the product owner are not technical. But that's another challenge I've seen, that's a challenge I've constantly seen within the team that will hinder the way how we write good, perfect user story. So how I've helped my team with that is to basically make it conversational, and as product owner are bringing these stories to the team, they also collaborate with the Scrum team so that they are able to discuss all the end-to-end in meeting that story to definition of done. Another challenges I've seen a team face when writing a user story is writing the user story in the perspective of the builder. And what I mean by this is team are having the who as a developer or as a product owner. Basically, whoever is writing that story, they are referring the who to them. And that will eliminate the whole focus of customer-centric focus when we're creating story, because we want the team to picture who are we building this for, so that they can see how they can connect that to the value. And whenever I see a team create a story and it's referred to the person that's creating it, it always and automatically, the team always automatically face challenges as they're building it, because they basically don't even know why they're building it. So things that I've done with that case is to always coach the team to create stories focusing on the end user. And sometimes too, I've had this team where they'll be like, oh, this story is not affecting direct user interface, or this story is not going to be affecting direct customer, or this basically is just an environmental setup, or this story is going to be more the overall build of the wireframe and all of that. And if that's the case, focusing also on the creation of that wireframe, and where they are focusing it on the person that's building it. So team have always improved when they are able to change it to the person that's actually going to be getting value from that story that have been created. So another challenge too that I've seen team face when they basically have user story that's not good is the team will write user story whereby they have no acceptance criteria. And if a story is written without acceptance criteria, then the team start to guess how should it look like, or what was the end product look like. And sometimes so far in my experience, I've seen developers can get so passionate about work, they can go beyond the boundaries of the actual acts. So that what I've done to help ensure that this is actually in place is to always look at all the story during our backlog health check and make sure that all user story have acceptance criteria. And during our backlog refinement, we are also discussing it. And those stories that do not have one, we are encouraging the PO and the team to come up with what a given acceptance criteria will look like for that particular story. So those are the typical examples I've faced a user story where team are facing different challenges in creating a good user story. So the next interview question is what is a user story, right? So if you're asked this simple question around what is a user story, and it's very important that you just answer what is a user story. This is not the time for you to start giving example, scenario, using all of those things. No, just be specific and simple and direct with them, asking you what is a user story. And how I'm going to answer this question is, what is a user story? A user story is a written functionality based on what a user wants. And in the user story we have, who are we building a task for or a functionality? What is it are we building? And also, what is the benefit, right? What is the goal, the benefit of us building that? And also must have an acceptance criteria. A user story is a story that's written in the perspective of the end user that focus on what a user wants, so like asking, what is a user story? And when you are asked what is a user story, it's very important for you to focus on what is a user story. This is not the time for you to start giving example or scenario on user story is this, user story is that, giving all the scenario answer. No, just be specific and answer what is a user story. A user story is a story written in the perspective of the end user, whereby it describes the functionality of what a user wants, and also having the list of criteria we must meet to consider that story being done. I would define user story simple as that. And for me, so far in my experience, a user story is a story that have basically who are we building this for, focus heavily on the customer we are building this for. And what is it are we building? And also, what is the benefit of having this new functionality or enhancement as we are building it? And at the end of it, having a list of acceptable criteria that we can tell the story is actually done. So that's how I'm going to answer user story. If you're a Scrum Master and you are struggling or you're having different challenges on how to answer user story, if you're a Scrum Master and you are having different challenges on how to support your team in coaching them or writing user story, and also how to guide your team into creating good user story, you can definitely email me at admin@aishascrumtech.com. I've helped a lot of counselors, Scrum Masters, and a lot of agile teams in creating good user story. And you can definitely email us so we can able to see your own case. So the next interview question we have is how have you coached your team into writing a good user story? And this is actually a very, very good question because they want to see you as a Scrum Master. What do you even understand about user story? And if you can also help a team that's struggling in creating user story. And this is very important because in order for an agile team to be very successful, beyond what we've already coached in agile mindset, best practices, following the Scrum values, all other things, is to having a ready backlog and also writing an acceptable good user story. This can overall increase the productivity of the team and also get them into delivery get them also into delivery. So that's why user story is very important. And sometimes it concerns me when I hear a lot of Scrum Master will be like, oh, I don't have to know user story. User story is not part of my job description. No, you are very wrong. Because as a Scrum Master, we also coach product owner. We also coach the Scrum team. And it's very important for us also to know what a user story is. Because if we do not know, how can we coach the team? How can we identify anti-patterns? And how can we get our team to that high performing? So you do not have to be technical to look at the user story and know that, okay, this is what being asked for. If you as a Scrum Master or as a product owner, you see a user story and the user story basically you cannot understand or anybody that's non-technical can understand, that's a bad user story. A good user story should be very simple, be specific and able and anyone can look at it and still understand what is the ask and what can we look at to meet and ensure that we actually meet the ask, right? So how I'm going to answer this, how I've coached a team in writing good user story is to give an example. This is the time now for you to give an example, right? Some question you don't have to be giving detailed example, but whenever you are asked how, right, how that comes for a scenario answer, right? So perfect time, I'll give an example. So given the fact, when I was a Scrum Master working for a company, Aisha Tech, I was hired for an agile team to basically coach them on how to be a good agile team. So one challenge I've noticed about this team was that the team was having a lot of difficulties in creating good user story. So how did I know that? I first of all look at the user story and I noticed that the user story have no acceptance criteria. User story is written in the perspective of the creator. The user story do not have basically the detail of what needs to be completed. The user story also have too many list of steps we have to complete. And by me looking at all of that, I could tell right away that this team, they need more support. And also looking at the product backlog too was not ready. So the first thing I did was to collaborate with the product owner. Because whenever I'm talking about the product backlog, I always like to include the product owner. So just to get their understanding on how their understanding of user story is. And the first thing this product owner actually told me was like, oh, Aisha, I am actually very new to this space. I was working as an operation manager and I was given this opportunity as we were transitioning to agile. So I took this position. Myself, I need assistance, I need help. So she was like, okay, and they asked me, okay, Aisha, what do you think we can improve in our user story? So the first thing first, I called out some of the anti-pattern I noticed. Like number one, the user story having like 10 different acceptance criteria. That's too large because there's a high chance we cannot complete that within the sprint. Number two, the user story is written the point of view that's building it. And that's something we can have a user story like that. And number three, we are writing user story for developers separate, and we're writing a user story for testers separate, and we're writing a user story for designers separate. And that also, it's an anti-pattern, right? So we want to ensure that we are writing user story that are small, right? We also have the inverse criteria, which is a very good acronyms we can use to get us to get our user story ready for a sprint. But let's just look at this particular one story. So I give an example. The user story basically is written in the point of the product owner. The user story is basically have a lot of and like start telling me how big the story is gonna be. The user story also basically do not have like the benefits. Why are we even doing this story to begin with? And also the user story is saying developers only. So what we first did was to do a lesson and educate the team. First thing I did was to also do a workshop. The product owner I got the product owner buy-in, the product owner was on it, the product owner was happy for it. So I was okay, the next thing we did was going to do a workshop on user story. So this workshop title was How to Write a Good User Story. And the first session was to identify what's not a good user story, right? So when we identify what's not a good user story, and then the team was like, oh, this is what we have, this is how we've been written it, this is what, so they all were energized, and I make it conversational to ask them, oh, what do you think is not a good user story? And it's surprisingly, some of them knew, but they just didn't think that it's also applied to them because they were too technical, right? So later on, after that workshop, I was able to educate them. I introduced the inverse criteria to them, and I introduced the SMART technique to the team. And I also took my time to get them to see the importance of writing small user story. To be honest, that was our biggest challenge. Our story was so big to the point that they had to split it like for developers only and testers only. So when we were able to do this different function, when we were able to do the discussion and the team agreed into a user story mapping, right? And this user story mapping was to get us to see our visible workflow or all the steps we need to take to complete this one functionality. So throughout my experience in coaching the team and guiding the team, eventually we were able to start writing our story smaller, change it to the perspective of the end user, and also having the value, right? The benefit of creating that story. I won't lie, it didn't take us right away and we fixed it. It took us like a spell to close to 6 months for us to able to get our story to that point. But eventually, through patience, dedication, and hard work, we were able to get to a level where team can write story that made sense to them, and even us that were not technical, we could look at it and see the value in the story. So that's how I've coached my team and supported the team in writing good user story. And if you're a Scrum Master or a Scrum Agile team, you are struggling with user story, or you have difficulty in user story, or you have difficulty answering this in the Scrum Master interview, any project manager interview, you can definitely email me at admin@aishascrumtech.com. I will definitely help support you all. And if you're interested in mentorship, do not hesitate to email us at admin@aishascrumtech.com. Thank you for watching Aisha Tech. Thank you all for subscribing to our channel. And thank you all for watching this interview series. See you all again in our next interview.